The story Luke gives us today does not rush toward joy. It unfolds slowly, shaped by time, waiting, and silence. It is a story for people who know what it means to hope carefully. Elizabeth and Zechariah are not young dreamers, imagining what life might become. They are people who have lived long enough to know disappointment. They have prayed prayers that were not answered on their timeline. They have learned how to live faithfully within what seems settled and unchangeable. And yet Luke tells us that in the fullness of time, a child is born. Not when hope is loud, not when certainty is strong, but when life has settled into what seemed permanent. That matters. This time of year, many of us turn to familiar Christmas movies. We know how they end. We know the rhythm of the story. And yet, we watch them again because they give us language for things we are feeling but may not know how to say. In All I Want for Christmas, the story centers on two children whose parents are divorced. What they want most is not a toy or a gift. They want their family to be whole again. They believe, quietly, stubbornly, that love can still find its way back. Much of the movie unfolds in waiting, miscommunication, and small moments of hope that seem almost too fragile to trust. What makes the story resonate is not everything works out neatly, but that the longing itself is taken seriously. The children are not mocked for wanting what seems unrealistic. Their hope is not dismissed as naive. It is treated as something worth honoring. That is Advent language. Elizabeth and Zechariah carry a longing just as tender. They do not speak it loudly. They do not center themselves in the story. They simply live with it, faithfully, patiently, quietly. And Luke tells us that God honors that longing. Advent reminds us that longing is not the opposite of faith. Often, longing is where faith lives. When the child is born, the community gathers to celebrate. And then comes a moment of naming. Everyone assumes the child will be named after his father. That is tradition. That is expectation. That is what makes sense. But Elizabeth speaks with clarity. His name is John. And Zechariah, still unable to speak, writes the same words. Only then does his voice return. That is not incidental. Luke is telling us that Zechariah's silence was not empty time. It was a season of listening, a season of letting go of control, a season of trusting that God's promise does not deepen on his ability to explain it or defend it. Many of us recognize that season. There are times where we do not know what to say anymore, when the world feels heavy, when hope feels risky, when silence feels safer than false certainty. Luke offers us reassurance. Silence does not mean God is absent. And when Zechariah finally speaks, he does not talk about himself. He sings. The song is not sentimental. It names mercy. It loosens fear. It imagines life for people who feel as though they are living in shadow. This is not denial of reality. It is trust that reality is not finished. Like so many Christmas stories, Luke's story is not really about everything being fixed. It is about restoration beginning. It's about love being remembered. It is about God's faithfulness showing up in ways that are quiet but transformative. John, the child born in Elizabeth's home, will not be the light himself. He will prepare the way. He will point beyond himself to something greater. Advent is not about having all the answers. It is about making room for mercy, making room for truth, making room for God to do what we cannot do on our own. As we move closer to Christmas, this story offers us grace. You do not have to force joy. You do not have to pretend everything is fine. You're allowed to arrive tired, uncertain, and hopeful all at once. God remembers mercy. God restores voices. God brings light faithfully even when we are weary. Heaven assures us that even now, hope is quietly taking shape. And in time, God's time, it will find its voice again. There are so many in our community right now that feel that their voice is not heard. They feel they have been silent. And to an extent they have. They have by our government, our politicians, by ICE employees. I'm curious to see, can you pass me yours? I'm curious to see how many of you, if you raise your hand, know someone or have witnessed something in the last months where someone was picked up by ICE or detained. Raise your hand. Those of you who have not, look around you. There are members of your church family who have experienced to an extent that. I bring this up because oftentimes people live with blinders on. It doesn't affect me, so I don't pay attention to it. Some of you wonder why I come up here Sundays and seem so upset or angry, whatever term you want to use, when I talked about certain things. Some of you may wonder, well, why is he talking politics? Because some will defer that me talking about ICE is being political. But it is not. It is following the example that Jesus taught us. It's speaking for the oppressed. It's speaking for those who are on the margins. Just like I've talked about how some of you, beginning January 1st, will be tremendously hit by healthcare changes. Some of you who have taken the time to really get to know what I do and how I do it will know that I am very stubborn and very defensive when it comes to you as a church family. I do the same thing for the employees. I do get riled up, but I also do that for people that I don't know. People who have sequestered themselves in their homes because they're afraid to go to work. Kids, even teenagers in high school, who are fearful to go to school because they feel that if they come home, their parent may no longer be coming home. And that results in them not having enough food, enough money to pay the bills, because of a system that continues to oppress. And how can you say that undocumented immigrants are illegal? There's not a single human being in this world that is illegal. The actions they might take may be illegal, but not the person themselves. See, you cannot be seeing this as us versus them. This is us, period. Human beings. Imagine yourself so desperate that you leave everything you own behind to move to another country through whatever means is necessary. How would you feel? Could you handle it? See, us just moving across the country is difficult. And we did it willingly, with our belongings. Yet it's not that easy to go see his family. It becomes expensive. See, I'm tired of this baloney where people say, well, they should do it the right way. How the hell don't you know if they are trying to do it the right way? Are you aware of how the system works? How many years it takes? See, when my dad, who migrated here as a child, who drove across the country into Wisconsin from South Texas with his entire family to pick crops, as a child, and I know some of you may have that experience because you grew up on a farm. See, that was part of your livelihood. That was part of his livelihood. But he had to drive across the country to do it. And when he graduated high school and joined the U.S. Army, he did not become an automatic U.S. citizen because he served this country. He didn't get a discount on all the paperwork or fees that go with it. Granted, when he did it, it was cheaper and it was way faster. It took him a few months. Now it takes you years. And I'm sorry, but the rhetoric that says, oh, all these illegal aliens are lazy and criminals. If you haven't met one, and this might sound harsh, keep your mouth quiet. Because you don't know anything. Unless you've met someone who's undocumented, I can bet you that that person is working their behind off. Often being paid way below minimum wage, under the table, yet we don't prosecute those who are paying them under the table. How does that work? Corporate greed. Why aren't we seeing that in our courts? All these companies, from small mom and pop companies to big corporations, why are we not seeing our government prosecute them? It is such a crime. You can't have it both ways. You say that undocumented immigrants are illegal and criminals, yet say they're taking our jobs. Really? How many of you like to pick up the crops? I know in California, for years, they have struggled to hire farmhands, even with giving benefits. Why? Because let's face it, we as, quote, Americans, even though America is a continent, we're lazy. Who wants to be out in the sun, hurting their back? working 12, 13, 14-hour days. See, the silence also comes from everyone who does not speak out against injustice. And it is no longer time for you to keep quiet. You've had almost a year to witness the atrocities that are happening to people. Look at the business owner who was taken from Chicago in September or October, 56 years old, otherwise healthy, died in ICE custody a few days ago of natural causes. We have people who are disappearing, have no contact with family or their lawyers. How would you feel if that happened to you or to your loved one? I want you to think about that. I want you to think about that as you celebrate Christmas this week. When you're eating your food and unwrapping your gifts with cheer and joy, with love and care and compassion with your family and your friends. And think, for every one of you that is in that room, how many are not able to do the same? And yes, my sermon went completely a different direction than it was. But I don't know about you, but I am tired of seeing my fellow humans suffering, hurting, crying. This past week, we had our second food pantry distribution for Camino Rising. And we actually helped about 14, 15 families. And some of them, as we sat there, we observed them. One, we thought was a family of 4, it was actually a family of 6. They needed other stuff that we don't provide through Camino. So, benefit of doing Camino and that I serve as your pastor, so I have other resources as pastor. So I told them, come back in the morning, and we'll talk. Now, if you know how I spoke to them, don't raise your hand. But those of you who don't know, how do you think I spoke to them when they don't speak the same language that I do? And it was in Spanish because I speak Spanish. See, no clue how to pronounce any of their words in their language. Dad didn't seem to speak a single word of English. Mom understood a few, spoke a few. And their kid, who's a middle schooler, like many Latino kids, wasn't present because he's in school. So who translates for us? My phone. Spoke to my phone. She spoke to the phone. I spoke to the phone. See, you find ways to help your fellow human. There was another one, an older lady and her son, that growing up Mexican, most of the time, and it might be resonate with some of you in your cultural experience, is that it takes a lot, especially for an older Mexican lady, to come for help, to admit that she needs help. And there was one here who needed help. Came her son, and we noticed she was only wearing a sweater. And Judy was kind enough to bring 3 of her coats that she no longer uses. And we put them out there for whoever needed them. And we told her, get the one in the middle. It's the warmest one, and it was the longest one. And she's like, no, it's okay, thank you. See, it was already hard enough for her to ask for help for food. So for us, encouraging her to get the code was a whole other level. And at that point, I spoke to her in Spanish. And I told her, don't be shy. There's no judgment. Just grab it. You need it, and we want to help you. We have to speak to them in how they can understand us, to know that we are not judging them. They want to be coming here. They want help with dignity. And you didn't see us taking pictures of the people we were helping. Of like, look what we're doing. You've heard me since I started here. We don't do that. Because how would you feel if you needed that help and it took you so much to ask for that help? So while Zechariah was silenced for months, you as Christians, as a church family, if you truly believe your Christianity is embodied as a big part of you, as part of your life, you cannot be silent. You need to speak up when you see an injustice. You need to be ready to lend a hand, because we cannot label people as criminals and lazy and say that they have jobs and then say that the housing shortage is because these illegals are taking all the homes. Well, I'm sorry, if they're lazy and criminals, how are they obtaining a house? So be like Zechariah after those months and start speaking. Start supporting your fellow human who wants nothing else but to be affirmed as a human being. Let us pray. Faithful and patient God, you meet us in our waiting, and you do not turn away from our weariness. When our voices feel uncertain, when our hope feels fragile, when we are unsure what to say or how to wait, remind us that you are still at work. Restore in us what has grown quiet. Loosen the grip of fear. Kindle a steady light within us as we move toward the birth of Christ. Help us to trust that love is still being born, mercy is still unfolding, and hope is still finding its way into the world. We offer ourselves to you in this Advent season, just as we are, and we wait with faith. Amen.